As I said, this coming Tuesday, MSPs are going to be asked to vote on whether a new law should be introduced in Scotland to allow some terminally ill people to receive help in ending their lives. It's just the first stage of the bill, no final decisions being made this week, but it is a big moment and it's certainly a big question. Perhaps also, hopefully, one of those times when our Parliament's seen at its best, respectful and considerate, as it should be. Liam McArthur, the Lib Dem MSP, brought the bill forward and he joins me now, I'm pleased to say. Good morning.
Good morning, Martin.
I'm seeing on the front page of the Herald on Sunday today, you are apparently pretty confident that you've got the numbers to get this through. Is that right?
I think I've long felt that the political mood in this Parliament had changed radically from the last time Parliament voted on this back in 2015. I think there's been a mood shift that has brought parliamentarians probably more in line with where the public has been for at least a couple of decades now, where there's been overwhelming support for a change in the law. Many of those colleagues actually come to this issue with their own experience of having lost a family member, a close friend, to a bad death. And I think that's framed this issue for them. But I think there's others who are looking at the changes we're seeing in states and countries around the world, seeing assisted dying laws of the type I'm proposing implemented safely, successfully, that continue to command strong public support and confidence within the medical community that's asked to oversee it and apply that process. And I think drawing confidence from that, I think the vote will be tight, it'll be close on Tuesday, but I think the point that was made there about Parliament at its best, I'm confident that too will come through in the debate. All the discussions I've had with MSP colleagues across the parties over the last probably 4 years of taking forward this bill, those have always been respectful, they've been measured, they've been considered, irrespective of colleagues' views on this issue, and I'm pretty sure that will be borne out by the debate on Tuesday.
Yeah, everybody seems to agree on that. Can you just, briefly if you can, just talk us through how this would work and crucially, who would be eligible for an assisted death?
Yeah, so there are no two assisted dying laws anywhere in the world that are the same, but there is, I suppose, two broad models. A more permissive model we've seen in the Benelux countries, in Netherlands and Belgium, and more recently in Canada. And then a terminal illness mental capacity model that was first introduced in Oregon in the late 1990s, has been rolled out in different states in the US and more recently across the different states in Australia and New Zealand. And my bill very much kind of replicates that. So eligibility would be based on having an advanced progressive terminal illness and the capacity to take the decision. That diagnosis would need to be made by two doctors acting independently. They would also have to make the individual aware of all the treatment choices available to make sure that the decision itself was an informed one. The discussion would have to, I think, get to the rationale for why the request would be made in the first instance. I think recognising there's a need to ensure that no undue pressure or coercion has been brought to bear. There'd be a wait period of 14 days between when the application is made by the patient and any medication being provided. That medication would be provided by a medical professional who would again have to satisfy themselves of capacity and intent, and the medication itself would be self-administered. And it's probably worth also pointing out that there'd be no requirement for this to happen within that, or sorry, straight after those 14 days. I think what we see in other jurisdictions is individuals with an advanced terminal illness going through that process, being found to be eligible, and then using it in a sense as a kind of insurance policy that if things get too much, they know that this option remains available, allowing them to get on with living the rest of their life. And I think, again, consistently across those jurisdictions, we see around a third of those that make an application for an assisted death don't ultimately end up using it because they find that the palliative and other care that's been provided to them meets their needs. So, as I say, this is a model that we see working very safely, very successfully, with robust safeguards in place, oversight, data gathering, and reporting taking place. And I'm confident that Scotland can develop a system along those lines that meets our needs and circumstances, but also meets meets the needs of dying Scots who are being let down and being failed by the current ban on assisted dying here in Scotland.
I'm interested in numbers. I mean, the parameters there are quite broad. An advanced and progressive disease, illness or condition from which they are unable to recover and can reasonably expect it to cause their premature death. I've heard you in the past say that in the first couple of years, you reckon 30-odd people in Scotland might choose to end their lives through this. It will take 20 years to get us up to maybe 400 people. And yet in Canada, 4% of deaths are assisted. Why do you think we would be so different?
Well, I think it's important to draw a distinction, as I said earlier, between the model of assisted dying in place in Canada, which is far more expansive in terms of its eligibility criteria.
But that's the concern, isn't it? It starts like your bill and ends up through the courts and whatever in years to come. Just, you know, it's the thin end of the wedge. It broadens out.
Well, let me address that, but first address that earlier point in relation to the numbers in Canada. The eligibility criteria are far more expansive. It arose as a result not of a parliamentary decision, but a challenge through the Supreme Court under the Canadian Constitution that the ban on assisted dying in Canada was unconstitutional. The court upheld that. The Parliament took forward legislation that didn't go far enough in reflecting the decision of the courts, which was appealed, and Parliament was forced to go further. It's based around suffering as well, which is clearly, I would say, a more subjective concept as opposed to the terminal illness mental capacity model that has been in place, as I say, in Oregon since the late 1990s and now across the States and Australia and New Zealand, and where we have seen no expansion of the eligibility criteria at all. And that was the conclusion reached by the Health Committee of the House of Commons in their report in February last year after an 18-month inquiry into this issue. They found no evidence of an expansion of that eligibility criteria. I think what we see in terms of the numbers, and I do admit this, what I said to the Finance Committee and to the Health Committee when I appeared to give evidence before them late last year and earlier this, coming up with exact figures in the early stages is difficult. It's not often done when legislation is brought forward. But again, looking at what we see from what has happened in those other jurisdictions with a similar model of assisted dying, the numbers do start off relatively low. Partly, I think, a reflection of maybe public awareness, maybe even public confidence in the process, but also in terms of the preparedness of medical professionals to undertake the training to get up and running with the system. I think we see, therefore, the numbers increasing over time. But ultimately, the numbers we see in those jurisdictions with this model of assisted dying is often less than 1% of overall deaths.
Liam McArthur, plenty more discussion on this over the week. It's debated on